Hi, my name is Sarah and I'm an English teacher and language anxiety coach, and I help anxious and nervous speakers of English overcome their fear so they can get the English results they really truly deserve. Now in this video I'm going to be talking about something I learnt a few years ago from a lady called Christine Kane. She has nothing to do with speaking English. But she's a business coach and she has a lot of really good ideas, and I'm kind of borrowing one of her ideas and applying it to language learning. So Christine Kane talks about something she calls the soul track and the strategy track. And if we think firstly about this strategy track, it's all the stuff we do to get results. So for you as a language learner, that could be like doing your homework, reading some grammar notes, reading a book, watching a YouTube video, doing a role play, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff that you are really, really familiar with. And I would call all this familiar stuff the outer path, because it's all the stuff that happens out here in the world. Now, the kind of counter to that is what Christine would call the soul track, and what I would call the inner path of language learning. And that's all the things that happen up here, the way you think and your belief systems, maybe even your feelings, your motivation, your productivity, your commitment, all of those things that are inside of you and yet don't really get talked about generally by teachers and course books and stuff like that. Now, the truth is that no matter how much work you put on this outer path, even if you study for 8 hours a day, if you don't have that backed up by a really strong inner path, you are going to have problems. Because think about it, if you're working for IELTS, let's use IELTS as an example. I always do, I don't know why. If you're working for IELTS, even if you are studying for 6 hours a day, if you are telling yourself all the time, I can't do it, it's too hard, I don't understand task 2, oh my god, task 1, it's just, you are making that work much, much harder than it needs to be, and you are very possibly affecting the final result you are going to get. So I'm going to share 2 stories with you. These are both real students that I have worked with. Both of them are exam students, and we're going to use them as an example of why this inner path is so important. So the first student I'm going to talk about was an Asian student, and they had a very busy job. Can't remember what they did, and they were applying to go to university in Europe, and this was going to be paid for by their work. Their company was basically sponsoring them to take IELTS and come to Europe to go to university, and then when they finished at university they would go back to their country and bring lots of new ideas into their organisation. Now, the university they wanted to go to was asking for a band 7, which is pretty high. And unfortunately, the student wasn't really at that level. Okay, so they really could have used a few months of general English to get their skills closer to that band 7 level. Now, not only that, but they were also a very, very anxious, nervous student. Reading and listening were kind of okay, but the writing was a problem because generally speaking, writing is very difficult for people who come from Asia, but it was the speaking that was the most challenging. And every time we did a speaking task, there were problems and there would be a lot of upset, and a lot of problems with fluency, all this kind of stuff. And it was simply because the student was so anxious and so stressed, basically they couldn't focus. So we tried to do some work on, we did some visualizing, we talked about positive thinking, we talked about, speaking positively to yourself. But this student, I always kind of felt they didn't really engage with that. I don't know if that's just a cultural difference between coming from West, the Western kind of way of thinking, and a slightly different Asian style of thinking. But whatever it was, for this student, they just couldn't connect with that. And I don't know exactly what happened in the end, but basically, while the student was with me, they didn't pass, they didn't get their band 7, and eventually they just stopped taking lessons. Now, the other student was Swiss, and they were a high school teacher. And in Switzerland, if you want to be a high school teacher, you must pass CPE. You have to, it's obligatory. And by the time I met this student, they had already failed CPE 3 times. That's quite a lot of failure. And the thing was that they had a deadline, because if they didn't pass CPE by this deadline, they were going to lose their job. So the pressure was really on for this student, and they didn't really know what the problem was, because sometimes they would do great with use of English, and then the next time use of English would be a fail. Sometimes the speaking would be really good, and then the next time it would be really bad. So they were very confused and very worried about what was going to happen to them. So obviously we did lots of outer path work. We did in particular a lot of exam strategies, really working on how to pass use of English Part 1, how to pass use of English Part 2, how to deal with listening Part 4, like very, very specific, focused practice on those difficult CPE tasks. We also, however, did lots and lots of inner path work. So we did lots of, I remember talking about breathing exercises to keep calm on the day. And I remember talking about visualizing stuff, so imagining the exam going well. And I'm pretty sure we talked about positive self-talk. So, praising yourself, telling yourself good things about yourself instead of beating yourself up. Now, in less than 3 months after we met, this student took CPE and passed. And I never saw them again, but I know that they kept their job, and I know it was a great result for that student. So what does this mean for you? Well, you might be one of those people who are very naturally confident and very happy with your abilities, and if so, that's awesome for you. Most people are not that fortunate. Most of us, on some level, somewhere in our heads, have got a lot of negative kind of stories that go round and round and round. And the thing is that those negative stories, they can really affect what happens in that outer path, right? So if we go back to the Asian student I talked about, a really good thing for them to do would be to practice voice recordings. And they did do this sometimes, but I think they got so demoralized with their progress that they stopped. And this is a mindset block, because if you want to make progress, you need to make a lot of effort over a long period of time. It's not easy to learn a foreign language, and this means it requires you to put in time and effort consistently so you get the result you want. But if you've got a mindset that says, well, I'm crap and this sucks and I'm never going to be able to do this, well, why would I bother? And then you stop. So that's an example of how this inner track affects that outer path. So I work a lot with this with my students. I specialize in helping people solve problems in that inner path so that they can get the results, those outer path results that they really want to achieve. If you'd like to know more about my work, please leave a comment below if you have any questions. I'm always happy to answer them, and thank you very much for watching this video.